Any of you that have been following me for any amount of time at all or have subscribed to my YouTube channel uh, know that one of the main things that's driving this for me is knowledge of and discovery of these giants. I'm not going to go off and speculate if there was any sexy giants. I'm just not going to do that. All right. I don't want to get sat on by a giant. Okay. I don't want to get rode by a giant. Okay. Uh, anyway, sorry, I digress there a little bit. Um, so there you have it, the three categories of large hominid. Imagine getting in an argument with a giant. You would only have to imagine it because it would never happen. Because if you're right there dealing with a giant, guess what? You're not going to argue. This motherfucker can pick you up, grab you by each ankle, and fucking rip you in half down the middle, huh? I'm talking about rip you in half down the middle. Whew. I'm not going to go off and speculate if there was any sexy giants. I'm just not going to do that. All right. I'm not going to go off and speculate if there was any sexy giants. I'm just not going to do that. All right. I'm not going to go off and speculate if there was any sexy giants. I'm just not going to do that. All right. I don't want to get sat on by a giant. Okay. I don't want to get rode by a giant. Okay. Giants that are known to have existed in North America. We know of the Ohio mounds. Let me just say this. I've said this before, but let me just mention this. There are no Indians in Indian burial mounds. Okay. Uh, just ask an Indian, right? These, for the most part, when they have bodies in them, they are giant bodies. Sometimes they're very, very tall people. Other times they're just flat out giants. And that's why it is illegal to go digging around in these quote unquote Indian burial mounds in the United States. That is against the law. And it's because this information is being suppressed. Uh, Also, we know that in the Grand Canyon, a big part of the Grand Canyon is cordoned off. In other words, they don't want people going there. It's also put on Indian reservations, and the Indians themselves will intercept you if you try to go over there. But there's mass Egyptian-like civilization that's been, or more than one, that's been discovered in the Grand Canyon. So all of this stuff is common knowledge. They just don't connect the dots for you in school anymore. And many of these reports from the early 1900s, reports from credible sources like the Smithsonian and New York Times, etc., and just papers all over the place talked about this all the time. It was common knowledge to people in this country just only 150 years ago that the giants used to exist on this continent. Well, what happened to them? Well, I don't know. It could have been a cataclysm. It could be the cataclysms that brought about the destruction of Atlantis. We are seeing indications that these are, in some regards, you might call them Atlantean type beings, depending on which beings we're talking about. Okay. But one of the most common things that's come to knowledge or come to our knowledge recently has been from Josh Reeves. And Josh Reeves has been able to connect the dots on a lot of stuff. But one of his areas of focus is these American ruins that are, that we're sitting smack dab in the middle of. There's more giants and archaeological sites that are probably even more fantastic than Egypt in many regards, sitting right here under our own feet. They just don't want people to know that. And since we've been indoctrinated into this Prussian education system, right, that has us all so, hornswoggled, since we're indoctrinated into this Prussian education system, we don't even think to challenge stuff like that, or we don't even think of the possibilities of what might be out there. And everyone should really start doing that, really should start questioning the history that we've been given as children growing up, going to schools, going to public schools, going to private schools. It doesn't matter. It's all the Prussian education system. And it is a system that was revolted against, believe it or not, in the United States. When the idea first came of mandatory schooling, it was not received very well at all. Okay, the kids were working in farms and ranches and maybe even factories at some time. I'm not saying that's a good thing, but these kids, the adults and society was used to having these kids available. Basically, they were like junior workers, and hopefully many of them were getting educated. I don't know what the numbers are, but the reason to have mandatory or compulsory schooling, as they call it, and send children to school is not to learn their ABCs and sing songs and learn history and science and stuff like that. Those are secondary attributes or secondary things that come about because of that. The primary thing is to get the children to obey the state, to get them to unquestioningly go along with status quo, not ask questions, keep your head down, obey the state, do what the politicians tell you to do what the police tell you to do, spy on one another, tell on your neighbors, anything that they could achieve to destroy the quote-unquote atomic family. Now, in my case, it worked quite well. I have two parents that were very into their own lifestyle, shall we say, and much to the detriment of me and the other person I was raised with. But that's just how it goes. And of course, they were married. I don't know if it was 13 years or maybe 15 years. I was with a girlfriend for 14 years. So, I mean, 15 years is quite an amazing achievement these days. And how being married, if you're married 15 years, it's like, wow, that's such an achievement. Back in the day, people used to actually remain married until death do us part, believe it or not. So the destruction of the atomic family, or the pending destruction of the atomic family, has been a great success for the controllers. It really has, because if you don't have your family to depend on, if you've been turned on by your own family, or just marginalized or whatever like that, that just gives you that many less people to talk to, that many less people to confide in, etc. Fortunately, I have some very mindful aunts and uncles and stuff like this who take familial relationships very seriously, and this is on my Mahon side of the family where I have these aunts and uncles, and also where these precepts or these morals and characteristics were built into them, or they were trained to think like that and live like that, and that's a good thing. Okay. Anyway, getting back to the giants, Josh Reeves has discovered made many fascinating observations and discoveries about the rock wall in Rockwall, Texas. The rock wall in Rockwall, Texas is it's well, first of all, what is it? What is the rock wall in Rockwall, Texas? That's a very good fucking question. To tell you the truth, I've never wondered that before. I figured it was a bunch of rocks put up there by American Indians laid out on the ground to like make a little fortress or something, something they could get behind and shoot arrows or guns or whatever they were doing. Or could even maybe be possibly built by some old fort, some cavalry unit could have put up a rock formation. That's not what the rock wall is. In Rockwall, Texas, which is right outside of Dallas, we may as well consider it a part of Dallas. We could almost just say Dallas, Texas, but we need to give that identifier in there of the rock wall, because that's why it's called Rockwall, Texas, and that's why we need to mention it's Rockwall, Texas, and technically not Dallas, Texas. But if it was, or if we took the liberty of calling it Dallas, Texas, which I often do, we could then make the statement that Dallas, Texas is the oldest city in the United States. Okay? Uh, at approximately 462,000 years old. Dallas, Texas is the oldest city in the world. Welcome to reality. When they were wanting to name Rockwall, Texas, somebody wanted to call it Smithtown, somebody else wanted to call it Jonesville, different stuff like this. People competing to have their name put on the town. They might have owned the local grocery store, as it was in Lubbock, Texas. Remember, I come from one of these towns that was practically in the same developmental area as Dallas, Texas. I come from Lubbock, Texas, and so that's just how it goes. These are the stories. The people came over during the pioneer days. They pushed to the wild west, and they came out here in covered wagons. For sure, came out here in covered wagons, either pulled by mules or horses, and they had very conservative values. And they also had a common enemy, which is the American Indians, the indigenous people that lived here at the time. And I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. We can't talk about history and sugarcoat things. The white man and the Europeans were in direct conflict with the Indians. That doesn't mean they had good relation. They didn't have good relationships with some Indian tribes, and were doing trading, and were in many cases having their lives saved by these American Indians. Different tribes or had different levels of hostility. And so, Indians was a real part of life back then. Many of us, in fact, knowingly or unknowingly, have Indian blood within us. I know a ton of European-looking people that have Indian blood in them. Some of them know it, some of them don't know it. Some of them are proud of it, some of them never mention it. Even just 50 years ago, it might be something that you might never mention. Today, it's much more fashionable and much more, chic, I guess you'd say, to say that you're part Indian. You're 1/16th Indian or 1/32nd Indian or 64th Indian or something like that. Well, so let me go ahead and take this opportunity to tell you that I don't know if I'm part Indian, but it has been rumored and has been suspected in my family on my dad's side. It has been suspected. Apparently, there was a woman back, I don't know how many generations ago, who was more of a dark-skinned woman with jet black hair and who didn't talk very much. All right, maybe it's because she didn't know English. But anyway, another reason that people think that I'm possibly part American Indian is because of just my features. I mean, obviously, I'm a very European-looking person, but I don't know. There's been a couple people in my life that have thought they've seen a little dark in there, And anyway, so I'm not claiming to be part American Indian, but I think there's a good chance that I am. And if I am, it would probably be something very small, like 1/32nd or 1/64th or something like that. So If there is such thing as a quote unquote pure white person, I don't technically I don't know if I would uh, qualify for that. So anyway, uh, but I don't, you know, I'm not gonna, disparage that. You know, uh, I'm white. I don't have a problem with that. I've been that way for a long time, and I'm not going to go around being ashamed of it or anything like that. At the same time, I lovingly, I don't see, I see only one race, and that is the human race. That is the race I see. All they come in all different colors, all different sizes, shapes, and levels of sexiness. Oh yeah, you got some sexy motherfuckers. Levels of sexiness. All right, for these different human beings of the same human race. It might think like I've kind of gone off to the side talking about these issues, but I haven't, because one of the most fascinating things about the subject of giants is that it brings into realization, and it brings us into discussion and of the realization of our own selves. You see, we could talk about UFOs. Well, you're not a UFO. You're not shaped like a UFO. You're not made out of metal. You're not made out of lights and lasers or anything like that. You're not a UFO, okay? The same can't be said for giants. You can in no way unequivocally say there is no giant blood in me. You just can't. Now, whether the giants have ever mixed with the humans, I really don't know. I suspect that they have. It seems only natural. There are people like John Lamb Lash who claim that the human genome has never been broken and that man has not been genetically modified by aliens or anything, even though he'll admit that they definitely tried. And I'm on board with that. I mean, something happened back with the Anunnaki. They did some type of modification, whether it was genetic or whatever, I don't know. But they have depictions of it. And if they didn't, at the very least, they tried. So there's been people and entities and agencies for a very long time that have at least tried to mess with us, to mess with our genes, and to alter us. And I'm talking about the Homo sapiens sapiens, us, the people. So anyway, when we have this discussion of giants, we just need to, understand when conversations go that way, where people start talking about uh, history, accepted history, real history, whatever, or the fake history that we're taught in school. Just history, period. And then also people, talking of different types of people, from what area of the world they were in from, what color was their skin, what were their eating habits, what types of weapons did they have, what types of homes did they build, what types of ships did they have canoes, or did they have a Kon-Tiki type raft, or they really could have gone around the world. We know from Heyerdahl, the man who wrote that book Kon-Tiki, that yes, a person can go around the world or at least halfway around the world in a raft made out of reeds. Okay, that's a very common material is reeds, and yes, you can bundle together a bunch of reeds and literally sail around the world. I think it was Thor Heyerdahl who wrote that book. So these things come into play, and they come into questions also, especially in the modern day, and less so in Asia, but definitely in the United States and everywhere across South America, Central America, and everything like that. We've got to take in the subject, and we've got to take in the reality of the Catholic Church, right? I mean, let's just not make any bones about it. The Catholic Church has had a profound effect, shall we say, on the Americas. The idea that people were coming over here for God, glory, and gold. I think what it was really more about was gold, gold, and gold. But one thing that they did find when they came over here was, let me say that again, one thing they found out when they did come over here was giants, giants, giants. Uh, yeah, they found giants. Okay, it's been widely reported. Magellan had reports of giants. Captain Cook, the most famous English explorer, went to Argentina. Argentina used to be called Patagonia. The country of Argentina, or the region that Argentina lies in, used to be called Patagonia. Well, what does Patagonia mean? Patagonia simply means land of the giants. So they call a lot of these things what they are. Just like with Bigfoot, there was a Bigfoot sighting practically in downtown Austin just earlier this summer. It was on the news. It was on the news on television. It was on the news in the Austin American Statesman. There was a Bigfoot sighting in Round Rock, which is kind of a suburb of Austin, and it was at a park, and it was a large hairy hominid. It was reported over more than one day by more than one person had this report. Well, it's right there on a road called Hairy Man Road. Okay, the fact that this road is called Hairy Man Road, that somebody named it Hairy Man Road 150 years ago, and people are seeing Bigfoot practically in downtown Austin today on Hairy Man Road, that's not a coincidence. Okay, folks, that is not a coincidence. And now that we are understanding more and more about Bigfoot, then it seems actually not quite that unusual, and will be less unusual in the future, because the veil that is between their world and our world, the veil separating the Sasquatch from mankind, is becoming thinner all the time. Is it just because people are, encroaching on their environment? Well, yeah, that's a part of it. I mean, America's, been explored and everything for 100 to 200 years. People all over the place. But truthfully, if you go out in the wild sometime, just go out in the country, whatever state you live in, just kind of go out there, and you'll start to get a scope of how much of the land here is empty. I mean, just empty, with not a person in sight. A vast majority of the land in the United States has no one living on it. No one at all. It's just out in the country. It's just out in the mountains, out in the streams, out in the deserts, out in the plain in West Texas. Yeah, it might be somebody owns it. It's under someone's control, but that doesn't mean there's people living there. And when you don't spend a lot of time outdoors, looking at these kind of objective realities, it can be easy to think, living in a small town, a big town, or a city. It can be it can be easy to think that, everything, there's just people everywhere. Well, there's not. There's not. And so the people that are going out into the wild and do have places out in the country and maybe have a ranch or a farm or something like this, depending on their area they live in, they're far more likely to run into some of these artifacts. I mean, about 1,000,000 times more likely to run upon the bones of a giant skeleton, to run up onto something like the Rockwall in Rockwall, Texas. So now we came full circle, and so let me touch on the Rockwall. Josh Reeves did not discover the Rockwall in Rockwall, Texas. It's already been known about. I think there's even a quasi-museum set up to give a little bit of the history. But the people who were in the city, or in the little hamlet or town of Rockwall, were needing a name for it because it was getting bigger. Some wanted to call it Smithsville. Some wanted to call it Jonesville. There's many different things that these people wanted to call it. To tie their name to the town forever. Maybe their business, their little struggling grocery store, their saloon, brothel, whatever it may be that they're trying to, tie down, to go down in history as the name of that town. And there were many ideas, and there was practically a contest going for it. Well, the word of the rock wall got around, you see, because farmers would, first of all, let me tell you this. If you go to Rockwall, Texas, to go look at the rock wall, what are you going to see? I'll tell you what you're going to see. You're going to see this. Nothing. You see that? That's a zero. A big nada, mucho, nothing, zip, nothing. Because the rock wall of Rockwall, Texas, is anywhere from 75 feet to 100 feet underneath the ground. You could get a shovel and dig for a month and not even be close. It's that far down. Okay, so that's the reason you can't go to Rockwall, Texas, and go have a look at the rock wall yourself. Climb up on it and everything like that. It's about 100 feet under the ground. Uh, so it is a wall down there. Once the word got to the Masons, and there was a heavy Masonic community there that it was there, they send in their teams of scientists and stuff to do some discoveries. They got some of the rock off of it. They weren't able to go down there; it was too far. But they were able to stick implements down there and get some little chips of the rock wall, what have you. First of all, the material that the rock wall of Rockwall, Texas, is made out of is high tech, to say the least. To say the least, they're saying that the materials that are inside the rock wall are of such a synthetic nature, or they've been, through metallurgy or whatever processes, been changed so much that it would be hard for today's scientists to do it. Not maybe necessarily the chemical, equations of it, but just the huge amounts of pressure that it would take to try to recreate this type of rock today, and also a lot of minerals and stuff from the rock wall that are, minerals that are comprised within the bricks or whatever they are of the rock wall itself are not from the Dallas area. In other words, they've been brought in from somewhere else. In some cases, it looks like even other parts of the world. So we've got to be in reality with the fact that this was a global civilization. The so-called Atlantean, Atlantis may be in the Atlantic Ocean, or the core of it or headquarters of Atlantis may be right there in the Atlantic. But Atlantis was a worldwide culture. And it also had a competing culture, which was an older culture, which was the culture of Wu, or Lemuria. It's very important to understand this, because in today's world, we're taught that it's democracy against communism, Christians against Islams, blacks against white, all this, nonsense. Always seems to be these two dual opposing forces. And if we start to study the Epic of Gilgamesh and other Sumerian texts, and we start to study the stories of Atlantis and the stories of Lemuria, the ones that are based in ancient writings, and because there is a lot of good information out there about this, we learned that there really are two opposing groups, and it may have started with Enki and Enkidu, the two brothers or half brothers from the Sumerian legends that came to loggerheads and started, these two big teams we see these days, which may even have their own. At least one of these teams has an Illuminati, and that's the team of the eagle. See, in today's world, unless you're somehow managed to become a hermit or just live completely out in the jungle away from this stuff, you fall on one of two teams: Team Serpent or Team Eagle. The serpent is the representation of the Lemurian civilization, which is more serpentine in nature, in character, or in nature, I guess you'd say. Their types of technology and their types of mindset and their types of magic, most importantly, because magic plays a huge role in all of this. Magic is something that was not doubted by the ancient peoples, and the very atmosphere, the very conditions on the earth, even just 12,000 years ago, were different than they are today. In Lubbock, Texas, we have the Lake Landmark site, where we studied these ancient humans who were indigenous people, the Clovis people, living in Lubbock, Texas, and they were up against bad odds. They could get eaten by a bear that when it's on all fours, sitting down or whatever, is still taller than a human being. It's called a short-faced bear. This bear can run 60 miles an hour. How the hell are you gonna get away from a bear that can run 60 miles an hour and it's about half as big as the room I'm in right now? You can't. There's no stone implements or little atlatl. That's what one weapon they found out that they had out here on the Southwest was an atlatl, and it was kind of like an arrow or a shaft or a bolt, whatever you want to call it. But it was put in this thing that was like a curved stick with a notch. It's kind of like one of these things that you throw a tennis ball with to your dog. It gives you that extra, the physics give you that extra leverage amount, so you're like an NBA, a professional baseball, pitcher, able to, throw that ball like that by using that whipping motion, but it's adding an entire another appendage, so that's even, I mean, it just gives you mad power. And you sling that arrow off of the atlatl. It would have something like this, like what you'd call like a bow from a bow and arrow, and it had feathers in it. It had a notch in it, but the thing that was also notched was this the atlatl, which is the device that stays with you. After you launch this arrow, the atlatl stays with you. It's a big stick that's kind of curved, kind of like that. Not too much. It's just slightly curved, just giving it a little bit more of an angle, and then it's notched on one end. And you just put this arrow up there and set it to where it'll notch in it, and this thing has feathers for flight, and then you just throw that thing. So it's almost like throwing an arrow instead of shooting it with a bow and arrow, and but it's better because you have that little cheat of that deal, which allows you to do it. That's not going to do anything against a short-faced bear. I mean, it's not going to do a damn thing. I mean, maybe if you had 10 guys throwing as many arrows as they could at that thing, I mean, I just don't know. I think the best idea would be to run. And I'm sure, and it's little known fact that in the ancient world, and I mean the pre-Atlantean world, the greatest problem facing human beings was wild animals. Getting killed by a wild animal used to be the number one concern for human beings. The number one danger, the number one cause of death. Getting devoured alive by a wild animal. It might even just be a wolf, a pack of coyotes, a little bear, or a gigantic short-faced bear, a grizzly bear, an American mountain lion. I mean, I'm just talking over here in the United States. Wolves, all kinds of things that would eat you up. And many of these animals had counterparts back in the day that were enormous. We know about the woolly mammoth, the Columbian mammoth, which is, these were right here in these parts. Also, they had an armadillo, that couldn't even get in a door. It was so big, way bigger than a person. Now, I don't think armadillo would possibly attack you. I don't know. It was just a dangerous world back then. But there were the people, it drove their intelligence to try to learn how to survive and everything. But also they had examples of other people that were surviving, and these were the giants. And these giants seem to have had access to the alchemy first. They seem to have had access to the metallurgy first. The giants somehow had control and mastery of fire first, before the human being. And the human being probably learned a lot of the skills and arts and crafts and everything we have today from the giants, who ironically we exterminated. The giants are dead now because of mankind. Giants were hunted down in every corner of the world, reviled. Giants had many traits that they're illustrated or shown as being these big retarded type giants, and nothing could be further from the truth. Many of them were highly intelligent, some say way more intelligent than mankind. They were also faster, obviously stronger, and cannibalistic. They would not even hesitate to pick you up, rip you limb from limb, and eat you. That wouldn't bother them at all. They were also gross. Most of them didn't have good hygiene. They stunk real bad. They just wallowed in their own crap and stuff. Maybe, I mean, they probably didn't do that, but just they're gross. You know what I mean? They're not like us where we have hygiene and stuff like that. They're very argumentative. Giants often fight with one another, getting in big brawls and stuff like that. The women of giants, you think human women are bad. Oh my God, buddy. You don't have the slightest idea. These bitches were fucking mean. In battle, when the Roman legions were battling armies of giants and getting their ass kicked, by the way, and this is all a matter of recorded history. Okay, they might not teach it to you in college, but the books that you're learning from, if they don't tell you to go over to this chapter, I'm not talking about the modern day accepted school books. I'm talking about the ancient writings. You know, they'll direct you to anything but that about the giants. But yeah, giants, the physical and corporeal and real existence of giants on the planet Earth is well documented. We wouldn't need to cite one Asian source, one American Indian source, one indigenous source, one African source, anywhere from all over the world. Just the European sources of this documentation are massive. Did you know that an emperor of Rome was a giant? There was an emperor of Rome who was over 9 feet tall. His name was Emperor Maximus because of his great size. Emperor Maximus ate 40 pounds of meat and 14 bottles of wine at each sitting. He could wear his wife's bracelet on his pinky. When he was nothing but a rude shepherd boy and was come across by the legion that was traveling to do battle somewhere, they were so amazed by his size that the general had him wrestle 6 of his greatest men, one after a time in wrestling. He defeated each one of them easily. Then he raced the general's horses, his fastest horses the general had, beat them. Then he came back and wrestled some more of the best soldiers just for fun, beat all of them. And he was hired for the Roman legion on the spot. In other words, they said, boy, you're coming with us. You just started a new life. Well, he ultimately became emperor of Rome, Emperor Maximus. But because of his own paranoia and also his despotic behavior, and then just people turning against him because of his size, because people just naturally don't like giants. Okay, it's uncomfortable to be in the same room with someone who could just pick you up and rip you in half. It just is, okay? That's all the reason you need to wonder why. Why did humanity stamp out giants all over the world? Because they were a direct threat. Imagine getting in an argument with a giant. You would only have to imagine it because it would never happen. Because if you're right there dealing with a giant, guess what? You're not going to argue. This motherfucker can pick you up, grab you by each ankle, and fucking rip you in half down the middle, huh? I'm talking about wrap you in half down the middle. Whew. I ain't trying to hear about none of that. And so the humans banded together, and there was a worldwide phenomenon. The people didn't even have to be connected and be communicating with one another to know that they needed to kill the giants, and had to have the desire, the burning desire to kill all of the giants. And so that's what it was. And quickly after followed the people with the elongated heads. And these are people, these elongated heads have been associated with Rockwall, believe it or not. There have been elongated head sightings and sites in the United States, not to be confused with sites of giants. See, I try to draw sharp delineations. There may be many different kinds of giants, but let's just talk about the 3 giant hominids. In my book, the way we're going to play it on my show, okay? This is Ian's philosophy on all this stuff. They don't teach this stuff in school. So yeah, I get to make up my own terms and my own categorization, categories and everything like this. And so here's the 3 categories that you got. 3 categories when it comes to giant hominids. You've got Bigfoot. That's one type of creature. It's a large, hairy hominid. Now, there may be up to at least 7 different distinct types with wild varying differences of Bigfoot, but we're going to put all Bigfoot in one category. Okay, so you got Bigfoot. Okay. Now, you have the second group, human beings. Okay, that's you and me. It doesn't matter what race they are, if they're 6 feet tall, if they're 4 feet tall, if they're black, white, orange, fat, skinny, ugly, sexy as hell. It just don't matter. They all go in the human category, okay? And then the third category, and that brings us up to number 3, and that is giants. And that's all the different types of giants. Many, many different types of giants. Some stupid giants, some smart giants, some middle of the road giants. I'm not going to go off and speculate if there was any sexy giants. I'm just not going to do that. All right. I don't want to get sat on by a giant. Okay. I don't want to get rode by a giant. Okay. Anyway, sorry, I digress there a little bit. So there you have it, the 3 categories of large hominids, and that does I'm not including the great apes in that. I'm just not. If I decide later to have a 4th group that would be like gorillas or something like that, actually I might do that for purposes of having 4 groups, and also for bringing a broader understanding to it, because the gorillas and monkeys and stuff, they're similar to us. That's why they're called simians. Simian is a scientific designation for human beings, animals, I mean, not animals, but apes, monkeys, baboas, chimpanzees, simians. And simian is a Latin word which simply means similar. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to look at a monkey and think, hey, a monkey looks a lot more like us than a dog does. A monkey looks a lot more like us than an insect does. It's a no fucking brainer, all right? So there you have it, the simians. And yes, I think from now on I am going to include them in the grouping, not of 3 now, but of 4. So in the group of 4 of large hominids, you have number 1, gorillas, as in the mountain gorilla. Gorillas are chimpanzees. I'm not really counting monkeys, okay? They're kind of just a subcategory. Number 2, actually there's 5. Yeah, so there's 5 groupings here. Number 1 is the groupings of large hominids. We've got 5, a distinct 5 classes, okay? Class number 1 of the large hominids is your chimpanzees and apes. Category number 2 is the Homo sapien, the human being. Category 3 is Bigfoot and all different types of Bigfoot creatures. Category number 4 is the giants, whether they be a 10-foot tall, 12-foot tall, or 25-foot tall giants, just all of the different kinds of giants. And we're gonna get into that again here in a moment. And then the last category is going to be the people of the elongated skulls, like the Paracas people, who I have personally gone to investigate in Peru just last year, and we looked at these large skulls. And the one that's the most famous, skull number 176, or the Chongo skull, Chongo monkey. You see, this plays into our categorization scheme we have now. That is, I went down there to investigate that, and that is frighteningly real. The skulls are real. None of it's fake. Interestingly enough, when you are being shown the skulls and seeing them in pictures or in museums or private collections, private museums, and you ask the people, well, that's so interesting. Where's the skeleton? The official story is this, that the skulls were considered sacred. And let me tell you 2 of the official stories. That the skulls were considered sacred. And so it was the skulls that were preserved and the bodies were discarded. As soon as I heard that, I was like, yeah, right. All these thousands and thousands of skulls anywhere, but not one fucking skeleton to show what kind of body held this up. What the fuck's going on there? And let me tell you, they found out because they've taken one of these mummies, supposed mumias, not a mummy in the classical sense that had been preserved intentionally or with mummification techniques of disemboweling it and adding a type of fluid to it and all this stuff. But mummies that came about naturally because they were interned or entombed in the very arid climate of Peru, basically in a desert-like condition. Please try to ignore that phone call. I'm trying to ignore it. I know who it's coming from. She's one of the most beautiful women in the world, literally, and I'm mad at her right now. So I'm not answering a phone call from the most beautiful woman in the world. If you thought I was crazy before, then you for sure know. Yes. So if any of the other, just letting the other four of you know, the other of the top 5 most beautiful women in the world, I'm putting the other 4 of y'all on notice. Don't piss me off because I won't answer your call, even if you call on Messenger, instant messenger. There you go. And there you have it. And that proves that. Now we got to have something harder to prove, and that's the existence of giants. Oh, Gunter, what's wrong? Come here, buddy. Oh, Gunter, you're a little creature. Oh, you're such a creature. What do you see? You ready to go outside, buddy? Oh, you're ready to go outside, aren't you? Okay. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so we just let Gunter out to go do his thing. And, we've talked about a number of things, even having to do with these giants. On another episode, we'll be talking about their armor, their methods of warfare, their social groups, which were very loose. A lot of them, lived in tribes. A lot of them lived solitary as giants in a solitary manner. And some of them, you don't hear about giants too much having arrows, but we know that arrows were something indicative of those times when human beings were interacting with giants. And although human beings may or may not be interacting with giants today, we are getting some disturbing reports that humans are interacting with Homo Capensis, which is one name, a quasi-scientific name for the Paracas people. I think there may be different types of races with elongated skulls. And that's where it gets into a whole nother game, huh? Yeah. We're going to hunt these fuckers down, huh? We're going to find out what's going on. Oh. No, really. We're going to, in a scholarly manner, in a well-meaning manner and everything like this, and a non-threatening manner, we are going to look for these truths, the truths of the Paracas people, the truths of the Homo Capensis. If you listen to the claims of Dr. Edward Spencer and Karen Hudes, spelled Hudes, look her up on YouTube, Karen Hudes, Karen, separate word, Hudes, or Dr. Edward Spencer. You can learn a lot about these Homo Capensis, regardless, even if some of it is speculation. A lot of it's based on pure fact. But if I can just cut right to the chase of one of the most interesting claims, and that is Karen Hudes' claim that after she was expelled from the World Bank, and she's since been hired back, after she became a whistleblower. What's up with that? That's right. It's like, oh my gosh. Okay, if you weren't on the payroll before, you sure are now, or they're trying to somehow keep her quiet or control her narrative or whatever. She talks a lot less about Homo Capensis. I will say that. She'll always refer that to Dr. Spencer, but she won't deny it. But while Karen was estranged, shall we say, from the World Bank, another big-time insider contacted her and let her know that, according to his information, the World Bank is owned and controlled by the Homo Capensis. The tall, 8-9 foot, not always that tall, but they're not giants, but they're very tall, but they have very big heads. And, there's also tales of these other types of visitors that are here that are very tall and have blonde hair and blue eyes, but they don't, if you get a look at them close, they don't quite look like us. You can tell they're not human. And these are these Nordics, or these, there's actually even different types of these. So, I mean, it just gets into a whole morass of different creatures, different humanoids, and different large sized hominids, giants, Homo Capensis, Bigfoot, chimpanzees and apes, and finally the human being, you and me. The smartest of any of those. I don't give a fuck what anybody says. This universe, this reality, this plane, this realm that we are living in has a star. And the star of the show is human beings. I refute any doctrine whatsoever that puts the human being second, that puts angels and gods above human beings. Now, I will admit, y'all do know that I am down with the narrative of Sophia, the heavenly Sophia, and that is God, and you're sitting on it right now, or standing, or walking, or running, or sprinting, or doing jumping jacks. Whatever you're doing on earth right now is what you're doing on top of God. Earth is God. There is a pleromic God, one of the aeons. The aeon Sophia is entrapped within this earth that we're in. This planet is different than any other planet. Even if there's other planets that have people on them, that civilizations and all this stuff, the planet is not like this planet, Earth, because this planet and Earth is the living embodiment of one of the aeons, the pleromic god Sophia. And if you want to learn more about this reality and see how it resonates with you, because it will, and it's not just because it's some fancy story, all the facts back it up, and there's our entire life story, that's the entire history of humanity is the story of this, our relationship to this God, which is below our feet. And some call her Sophia, some call her Gaia. You know, there's a new age version to all this. Don't get me wrong, but the reality of Sophia and the narratives of Sophia is something that the Catholic Church went to great lengths to try to stamp out and to try to eradicate, and other agencies and organizations within the human civilization have tried very hard to stamp this out. And they were almost successful. And if it wouldn't have been for the discoveries at the Dead Sea Scrolls and also the Nag Hammadi codices, not sure how we would be getting this information these days. But it's here with us now. It corroborates everything we know from ancient history, even corroborates a lot of the Bible, believe it or not. I mean, you talk about a secular source, the early Christians and the Gnostics, the so-called Gnostics. And let me just interject this right here. There was more than one group of Gnostics, and they were not all friendly with one another. So to be this Gnostic or that Gnostic, just to say a blanket term of Gnostics is incorrect, because there is more than one. There are probably at least several different types of Gnostics who did not get along, by the way, and had totally different preachings and practices, totally different philosophies. But one thing that a lot of them did have was a common language. And so you have a lot of this quote-unquote Gnostic material that seems to contradict itself. And it does, because it was Gnostic against Gnostic, Goo versus Goo, Christian versus Gnosticism. That was a big one right there, Christians versus Gnostics. And the Christians, in the most brutal and bloodthirsty way, stamped out the Gnostics, other human beings, like, for instance, Hypatia of Alexandria. The murder of Hypatia by the mob, where she was literally rended bone from bone, shred to shred. They wouldn't even stop killing her once, just chewing the meat off the bones of just tearing a woman to pieces in raw, who's sitting there speaking in front of you, that was seized by the crowd and literally torn limb from limb. Children and everything participating. Their hatred for this woman was so great, even though many of the people in the audience loved her, but they didn't dare speak out or try to stop it, because they too would have been torn limb from limb. And who knows, maybe they were. Maybe some people did try to do something about it and were torn limb from limb, and we just don't hear about this in the recorded history. But this one event is reported by up to at least 7 different historical sources report the murder of Hypatia in Alexandria, and at least 3, maybe 4 of these sources were first-hand accounts. I mean, written by someone who was standing right there and watching her getting torn limb from limb. Okay, that happened. All right, that is not make believe. That happened, and she was the. They even know the name of the guy who was at the head of the mob, who organized the whole thing and had her torn limb from limb, and he was a type of Christian missionary, a zealot. I mean, we know that Christians have done terrible things in the past. Christianity, no matter how you slice it, is part of your legacy. Even if you've been denying God or whatever for 5 or 6 generations in Norway or Sweden or something like that, it don't matter, because before that, your very ancestors were Christian, for sure. No matter how many pagan leanings they had or anything like that, and before they were Christian, they were for sure pagan. Nature worshiping, Druidism, all this stuff. That's just how it was. And many of these symbols, Druidic symbols, have been drawn into Christianity and into militaries worldwide to this day. In the military, a good example would be the oak leaf. You see some of the higher commanders and generals and admirals and stuff are of all different countries are decorated with the insignia of oak leaves. Well, this is a Druidic symbol. That's exactly where that came from. I mean, it even looks like the little Druidic symbols that they had of oak leaves, little acorns on them and everything. So this is known history. They don't teach you that in school, though. There's a wealth of things that you can learn on the internet and from other sources, but right here on this show, that are easy to corroborate. But yet we didn't know about it because we weren't taught that in school. We just weren't. And so that's one of the number of things that I bring up on my show is secrets hidden in plain sight, so to speak. Things that are easy to corroborate, things that make sense. And but you just never knew that before because we live in a society where we're programmed by television and movies. And yeah, that was a Hollywood movie director that was just calling a minute ago when my deal was interrupted by that phone call. And no, I'm not making that shit up. A literal bona fide Hollywood movie director who has worked in movies that you've for sure heard of and for sure have seen, maybe not in the capacity as a director, but in a capacity that she used to serve, that I'm not going to go into specifics because I don't want to give away the secret of who this person is, because some of you obviously out there are going to know who this person is, and that's a secret between me and her. She is one of the most beautiful women in the world. We're kind of in the process of, I wouldn't say breaking up, but she's fixing to hit the big time. That's really all I can say. She's fixing to hit the big time, and we knew from the beginning that this was happening. She was in the process of this happening. I've been helping her to this end, night and day, for months and months, and would gladly do it again, even knowing that I'm going to lose her, not to another man, but basically to the world, to all of y'all, because she's fixing to be a big shot. And she says we'll remain friends and lovers for the rest of our lives. And I hope that that's true. But I love her. But right now, I'm not answering her phone calls. If for no other reason, just because I'm giving this this testimony in this workshop right now. Okay, so that basically, I think I've covered everything that I want to cover. You saw the video at the beginning that showed the giant animals. They have statues, bronze statues of these giant animals at the Lubbock Lake Landmark Site in Lubbock, Texas, which has a museum down there on the lake site where people used to, in groups, hunt buffalo. And before that, they probably hunted these woolly mammoths. We know for a fact that mankind used to hunt woolly mammoths. Don't want to go into this, but there's pottery in Peru that shows mankind interacting with actual dinosaurs and using dinosaurs as beasts of burden. That's a whole different other subject. But let me just say the reality as it's been given to us is just a fairy tale, and it's very unimaginative. It's not as colorful and awe-inspiring as the real thing, our real history. Yes, giants are real. Yes, we're running away from giants. Yes, the Roman legion got their ass kicked and lost tens of thousands of men from fighting with giants. until they finally learn the tactics of the giants and use this, the good old noodle, the good old human brain, to outsmart the motherfucking giants, to overcome their great size, their ways of grouping together in organizations, and their way of doing battle. And one of the things was the heat. If they could draw them out of the mountains onto the plain, giants are far more susceptible to heat than humans are. They can become tired very quickly. Look how much surface area they have of their skin. Imagine the sun blazing down on that. You know, we're down here with our little tans and their big white asses up there, just being rained all this, solar energy and sun being just put on them, and they're tired within the first 10 minutes probably. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. All right. So anyway, I'm Anthropos. Thank you for joining me here today on another kick-ass episode of You Don't Know. Because if there's one cosmic truth, one universal truth, the truth is you don't know. So don't act like you do, huh? All right. Y'all have a good day. Thank you.